Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be taking a look at the new Eachine Lizard105S. Now before I go any further, I just want to mention that this is not a review video. Banggood contacted me and asked me if I wanted to be a beta tester of the new Lizard, and I thought it was a good idea. You see, a lot of the time the customer ends up being the beta tester, and that is because the models are very cheap. They're working to a price, and usually on paper these specifications look great, but in the end it gets sent out to the customer and usually the reviewers at the same time, and 9 times out of 10 there's a problem and you have to deal with customer service, and it's a huge pain because they're in China. And lately there's been such a push with technology that it feels like they're rushing to get these models out before a different one comes along and just makes it obsolete, you know. So I think this is a step in the right direction. We have a community of people, YouTube reviewers, and also people on RC groups and other forums and blogs that are flying these models and testing them all the time. So, you know, they don't have to pay us. They can just send us the model before it goes out to the customer, ask us for our feedback, and we can say, look, this needs changing. And I really hope that that happens with this model. So I'm going to take you through these specifications and the issues that I have found and the stuff that I'm going to report back to Banggood about. So first of all, let's talk about the direction of this new Lizard. So the last Lizard was very popular again because it was cheap and it was a brushless micro, one of the first that really got everything together with an on-screen display. And I was actually quite surprised at first when I saw what they were doing with this one. You see, this one has got a built-in DVR. It's a 720p recorder, a bit like the Split, except it only records in 720p, but it does record at 60 frames per second. And I thought, why didn't they just put a CCD camera on here? But then I realized that there are so many 2-inch models out there now with a CCD camera, it would just probably get lost. And instead, what they've done is try to innovate, and I quite like that, actually. So yes, it is a brushless micro. It weighs 86 grams without a battery. This particular one has come with a battery. However, everything you're seeing here could potentially change. But at the date of this video, everything that I've got here is matching the spec on Banggood's website. So with the battery, it weighs 146 grams, which is quite heavy. However, the battery that it comes with is a 4S, so it's a 550 milliamp ATC battery, and yeah, I was quite surprised at that actually, because the motors are a 1104 6000 kV, but I have been flying this a lot and these motors seem to take this battery. So the propellers are also bigger. They're a 2.4 inch prop. They're the 2035, and it actually came with the props installed out of the box, and I've also received a spare set of those as well, and we got some Velcro straps in there, some spare screws, etc. Now the frame is really odd. It's using these vertical arms here, and I think it's a bit unnecessary, because what they've done is put these braces in here, because when the arms are vertical you get a weakness then on the horizontal, whereas when the arms are flat out like a normal quadcopter, the weakness is on the vertical. So they've put these braces in there, which to me is a bit counterintuitive. The idea is, with the arms being vertical like that, is it gives a thinner profile, so it cuts through the air easier. That's the idea, so there's less drag. However, if you have to put these braces on here, then yeah, I think that's a little bit counterintuitive. And also, in order to get these arms vertical like this, they've had to put a load of aluminium parts in, which has just bumped the weight up. So personally, this is just my opinion, I think they should have just gone with a regular quadcopter style frame rather than this design, but I guess they wanted to be different. One thing that is good about this frame design is that the ESCs can be recessed. Can you see there? We've got this bottom plate down here, and the ESCs are actually recessed down there. And then above there, we've got some standoffs and the flight controller. And then above is the DVR recorder. And it's all on a 20 by 20 stack. You're probably also wondering while looking at this, could you fit a split mini in there? And I think you could. I think the fact that the ESCs sit lower, we've got quite a bit of space here. I think you could fit a split mini in there. So let's talk about the ESCs. They are a 28 amp 4-in-1. They are BL Heli S, so support D-Shot 600. Underneath we have the XT30 connector, which isn't connected to the ESCs. It's actually correctly connected to the flight controller, which has a current sensor, and that's all working, so thumbs up there. So let's talk about the flight controller. It's an Omnibus F4SD. They call it the Corner Nano, I believe, and I was trying to figure out if it's a copy. I couldn't find the original. I know there is an Omnibus F4SD Corners out there, but I've not seen a Nano. Now, I've made some changes to this one because I've done a lot of testing with it, but something that is fairly unique to these corner boards is that they have a isolated IMU, and it had a cover over the top of it, and this is the cover here. It screws in underneath the board, and then you have the IMU, which sits in silicon. How do I know this? Because I had to take it all apart. Here is the silicon part. By the way, I would not recommend doing this. I've had a problem with the way this copter flies, and I had to dissect it. So I took this off and I got it out of this silicon here. But anyways, I'll talk more about that later. Let's get on with the specs. It came flashed with Betaflight version 3.22, I think it was, but don't pay too much attention to that. As I say, this is a beta version of the copter. Above that, we've got the DVR board, and we've just got a single button to start and stop the recording. There's no special menus or anything like that. In fact, when you plug the battery in, it starts recording straight away, and there's nothing you can do about that. Very similar to the Stack X that Eachine released, except a smaller version. However, unlike the Split Mini, it is just a single 20 by 20 board. Has a microphone as well. And if we look around this side here, this is where the micro SD card slots in, and a little bit of a design flaw there because it sits opposite this ribbon cable here, which is for that isolated IMU. And the micro SD card is not on a spring, which I usually like, but means that you can't get at it because this is in the way, and it's really difficult to get your nail in there. I've found that in order to remove the micro SD card, I've been having to use a pair of tweezers, which, you know, is not ideal at all. I'm using a 32GB micro SD card here. It's a class 10, it's a U1. And the bit rate that it outputs is around about 13 megabits. So, you know, if you consider it's doing 60 FPS, you want to half that. So, yeah, fairly low bit rate, I would say. Very similar to the 808/16, actually. And you can see there we have got a ribbon cable that goes up to the VTX up the top there, and you can actually take that out if you move this part forward. Yeah, you're probably thinking that ribbon isn't great coming out the side, and I agree with you. And we've got the USB connector that side. I think it would have been better if they flipped it around so the USB connector came out of the front and this was a little bit more protected at the back there, because yeah, we have it exposed to the elements there, but it does have a load of silicone on it to stop it coming apart. I have to say, all the testing that I've done with this, I've taken it apart so many times and none of the components have failed, so that's been a plus. But yeah, you've got space at the front there. I think they could have had the USB connector there, and that would be a very easy fix if you are listening, Eachine. So above that, we've got the VTX. It's a 48 channel VTX. It switches from 25 milliwatt to 200 milliwatt. It's using a micro UFL connector. One slight problem though, the button is right underneath there. You'd have to use a screwdriver to get to it. It's a 10-second press to change the power output. Then you've got a bunch of lights on here for your different bands and channels. It's the usual 2-second press and short press to go through all of those. And then if we come out to the antenna, this is an interesting one. It's the Real ACC UX2. I believe it's a copy of the Luminaire antenna. It's like a shrunken down cloverleaf antenna, right hand polarized. You cannot remove it. It's just going into this 3D printed mount here. Of course you could remove it from the 3D printed mount. What I mean is it doesn't have a connector other than the UFL connector on it there, so you'd have to replace the whole thing if you wanted to change the antenna out. And then we have got up the top the receiver. This is the Bind and Fly version for FreeSky, so this is the XM Plus. It's also going to be available, I believe, in FlySky and DSM2, DSMX as well. It did not come with these cable ties at the top here. The antenna was just routed through these holes at the back. However, they would easily catch the props, and it's not easy to put cable ties on this part here, so I've just routed that around there as well. And then finally we have the camera up the front. It's a CMOS camera because it's, you know, going into the DVR recorder, so CCD cameras don't have the resolution to do that. And the field of view on it's 130 degrees. And lastly at the back we do actually have a LED and buzzer. So the LEDs are connected to the DIN and they are set up. And the buzzer you can also set up as a lost model alarm. The only thing I notice about this really is it's not attached very well, just on this sticky pad here, which is on this 3D printed mount at the back. So while I'm here, I'll talk about some of the other stuff that came in the box. We have these prop protectors, which I think is interesting because I really wouldn't want to fly this one indoors with this 4S battery. It is really mean. But yeah, you can connect those on there. They've given you some longer screws which you'll need to go through here so that the screws reach the back of the motor. I always think that, you know, it'd be much better if we had a clip-on solution rather than having to undo all the screws of the motors. No one wants to mess around doing that to have a indoor model, but, you know, they've given you that option. We've got a Phillips screwdriver, and we've also got a hex driver as well on the 1.5mm size. This one's a 2mm. And yeah, I mentioned the props. And the box that it comes in is quite a big box, and the copter fits in there with the props on. That's always a plus for me. There wasn't any instructions with this. You can download them off the Banggood website, and I imagine that you probably would get a manual with the finished version, but I can't guarantee that. I was also given this double-sided sticky foam pad, which I ended up using actually to replace the foam on the IMU. Yeah, I've had quite a journey with this one, so let's talk about that next. So in general, I was actually quite impressed with the components that came on this. The video and DVR worked fantastically, I thought. The latency wasn't bad whatsoever. I couldn't notice it actually, and it recorded the video every single time. The problem that I had with this copter was how it flew, specifically under heavy throttle. You'll notice that I've got some soft mounts on here. This is from a load of testing that I've done. Also mentioned I removed the IMU here and replaced it with foam. Let me overlay some video and show you the problem. So when you give it a load of throttle, it wobbles on the roll axis. And I've had to test so many things to try and figure out what it is, and I still can't really tell you what it is. I think it is the frame that is vibrating, and I think that the fact that this is a CMOS camera makes that look worse, but let me tell you the things that I did to try and combat it. So, I mentioned that I played around with the floating IMU, and this was actually my friend NJ Tech's idea. I showed him the footage, and he had the idea of changing the mounting on this IMU here. So, I dissected it. I took this silicon out here, removed this, and I got some double-sided tape, and I hard mounted it to the chip. No difference. So I tried some thicker foam tape, no difference. I tried this, no difference. I then soft mounted the motors because I thought maybe it's vibrations coming through here, no difference. So then I thought maybe it's electrical noise. I fitted a capacitor on here, no difference. I tried 2-inch props, actually 2 sets of different 2-inch props. It made no difference. And of course I played around with the PIDs, they weren't the problem. Now the flight controller doesn't have a data flash, so I can't go in there and look at black box either. You could maybe wire up a external one, such as the Open Logger system, I think, but I'm pretty much stuck with it. So I think it's down to this frame construction. I do think that with the 4S battery, the frame is just vibrating and it's causing the CMOS camera to vibrate, and I could never iron it out. So I would say to Eachine, I think they need to take a look at this, because otherwise you have to fly it on really low throttle. If you fly it on really low throttle, you don't get these wobbles or shakes. I tried a 2-cell battery and a 3-cell battery, and it still did it. I also did a load of continuity testing to make sure that there was no sort of ground loop or shorts, and that wasn't a problem. And of course adding the soft mounts as well gave a bit of separation between the motors. So it seems like it's just got this issue, and if you don't think it's that bad, let me know in the comments. For me personally, I'd want the HD footage to be sharp and clear without any wobbles. But the original Lizard actually had a little bit of vibration issues because it was using one of those CMOS cameras, the all-in-ones, and those were very susceptible to vibrations. And I thought that was acceptable. It's just that when you move to HD, it's more noticeable, and it just bothers me more because it's the HD footage that you want to watch back, and you don't want jello and shakes all over it. But let me know in the comments what you think about that, and if you think that it needs fixing before you'll buy into this. So, taking a look at the DVR footage, and look how clean that picture is. I was really impressed with the video reception and how little noise was coming through to the system, which again makes me think that these shakes aren't being caused by electrical noise but vibration through the frame, and I think that is going to be my conclusion of it. And other than, you know, removing the flight controller, maybe sticking different motors on it or put it in a completely different frame, I think that is taking it a little bit too far when it comes to the testing of this model. You know, what I wanted to get out there was that it maybe has issues that don't require you to switch the frame out. So I'm going to feed this back to Banggood and see what they say about it. And you can see if you keep the throttle fairly low, you don't get these issues. It's just when you pump up on the throttle, just look at that, a crazy amount of shake there. So I think something needs to be done about that. As for the latency, I couldn't notice any at all. It was just like flying through a CCD camera to me, but I'm sure if you're an avid racer you might notice that. But I could notice it more with the split than this. I could just fly this normally. What I will say though is that it needs a bright day. I had a go at flying indoors, and we've got those energy saving light bulbs, and I couldn't practically see anything. So yeah, if you put those prop protectors on and don't have nice lighting indoors, then you're not going to see much. But outdoors, I thought it was great, and I didn't think the dynamic range was too bad either. Yeah, it gets a little bit dark, when it's facing the sun, but not too bad. So I think if they can just sort out whatever's causing these vibrations for me, this would be a winner. So I'll feed that back to them and hopefully they will sort it out. You can see the on-screen display also has the current on there. It doesn't have the RSSI. This XM Plus that they ship with it does not have the RSSI firmware. However, it was selected in the on-screen display, so I turned that off. You're going to get a 3-minute flight time with it, which is fine. And like I say, I'll feed all this back. And if you want to check the specs out, I'll put a link in the description. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.